never seen anything like that. I mean, I've seen jiu-jitsu, but those guys are amazing.
A great honor to have the Machado brothers.
Machado.
It's Carlos Machado.
I am here with a friend, above all, a great person. He's a man of many stories and an incredible background, Mr. Roy Kurban. I will let him talk about himself. I'm here to learn and to listen. He's a distinguished public servant. He has been in the military, served our forces. Thank you for your service, sir. He has been in law enforcement, has been a judge, I would say justice of the peace. And he was peers to probably the best luminaries of the karate and martial arts community in America in the 60s, the 70s, and I would say the early 90s. He was right there on the cusp. He was right there when the wave was high. So there's a lot of story about it, a lot of history about it, and I can't wait to hear more. And Mr. Roy Kurban, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
It's an honor to be here with you, sir. I'm real excited about this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. So this doesn't have an order. I want to go everywhere, anywhere. And when I was talking to you briefly before we started the episode, I was so intrigued about your story behind the scenes on the tournaments, how you evolved, the kind of counsel you got from the great, rest in peace, Chuck Norris.
Yes.
And I'd like to elaborate on that, if possible, because I see how much martial arts played out a role in your life, which it still does.
It does.
But also how instrumental it was on your career, because we talk about service-oriented, right?
Yes, sir.
If we are instructors, you're serving our community, our students, are impacting their lives.
Yes.
With the martial arts.
Absolutely.
And then you transitioned into serving your community in the law enforcement
yes, sir.
Field. And then as a judge, and then from then on. So I'd like you to elaborate on that first, the role of martial arts, on how you molded your choices.
Well, I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world. I've had great teachers and great friends. And I started training when I was 16. And there was a young instructor named Alan Steen. This is 1965. And the following year, he was to win the International Karate Championship in Long Beach. But I remember the first time I went to his class, my very first martial arts class, I watched him warming up and throwing some kicks. And I thought, I can't believe a guy this old is that fast. And he was 25 years old. So that's my first impression of him. But I came up in a great club with great people and great teachers. Alan Steen taught his teachers how to teach. I was surrounded by great people. The world champion Skipper Mullins was an Alan Steen student. The incredible Larry Castor, who was as much a brother to me as he was my trainer and coach. Jerry Wiseman, Tim Taya, Philip Ola, Dennis Doris. Just a whole bevy of great teachers. Yes, sir.
Incredible.
Yes, sir.
Practitioners.
We were all in love with the martial arts and real excited. We lived it.
Would you mind elaborate a little bit? Because Alan Steen is like a Hall of Famer in the karate world. And he's a name that I often hear about. And I see old black and white YouTube clips of him going to battle with Chuck Norris and others. Elaborate, what kind of martial artist he was?
Well, he started at UT at Austin, and it was a very fortunate thing. He was down there studying engineering is how he started. And there was a young man from Korea named Jun Ri, who was from Seoul, Korea, and he was still an officer in the Korean Army, and he came to UT at Austin to get a degree in engineering. And he opened what they called a stretching club. It said that's how he introduced it. But he started a Taekwondo club down in the 50s. Alan Steen walked into it. He loved it. He stayed with him, and he made his black belt under Jun Ri in 62. And Pat Burleson was in that group. Pat Burleson trained under Mr. Ri. So the Pat Burleson and Alan Steen, they started their clubs. They had tremendous people come up under them and swept Texas. They had great teachers that fought everywhere, great black belts. They were just incredible.
You talk about Pat Burleson, another heavyweight.
Oh,
in
unbelievable
the
guy.
Community.
Yes.
I was fortunate enough to meet him as a friend. And also he came to my dojo when I first came to Dallas, Texas, working out at the Chuck Norris's studio, where many people don't know. My first location in Dallas was inside a TV studio, and lo and behold, Mr. Burleson showed up there with a white belt on his waist, And he was a stud no matter what he did. That guy was, like I mentioned to you,
Yes, sir.
one of the strongest men I ever met. But please, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I saw Pat Burleson. I went to his tournament. This was 65 or 66. He was in an XKE, a Jaguar, which is an exotic car, but it was really exotic in the United States in the 60s. And everybody said, doesn't he look just like Robert Mitchum? And he did. And Alan Steen was in Dallas. Pat Burleson was in Fort Worth. And they both just developed incredible stables of fighters and people that went on to become champions and had their own school. Out of Dallas, there was Fred Wren, who went on to become the U.S. champion, was ranked among the top 10 black belts, at one time #1 in the United States. Skipper Mullins, who won the world championship in New York City in '68. Larry Castor, great teacher, great fighter, principal teacher and martial artist, incredible guy. But Philip Ola, who went on to have a great career in Washington, D.C., was one of the best I'd ever seen. All these people went on to do different things. And Pat Burleson had a group come up under him that were incredible. Jim Buten, Bill Watson, Chuck Lovin, one of the toughest guys who ever lived. All these kind of people, and there's more. And what I'll probably do is forget them. I'm so excited about being here. I'll forget to tell you, but both guys, and we were at constant war. Dallas County against Tarrant County, against Steen's group, against Pat's group, but it was always great spirited competition.
How was back in that day when you started competing in karate tournaments?
Well,
the rule format, and also there was no pads or anything. It was like almost like bare knuckle on the face, right?
Well, yes, it was a good way to explain the way it was done back then. It was like a wind sprint, a 50-yard dash. The matches would last 2 minutes, but they seldom did. They could be over in 30 seconds. If you get that 2-0, it's over. So everybody got in there and went real hard, real fast. I fought on concrete floors. I fought in dirt. I fought in parking lots. Wherever the tournament was held, a real nice tournament would be at a convention center with a stage if you made it to finals. But it was the only pads that we wore would be a groin protector, nothing else. Groin was on, head was on, and basically the rules were set in such a way. If I threw a punch and you stepped into it and it hit you and broke your jaw, I won because you should have blocked or you shouldn't have stepped into it. If you moved into the punch or kick, it was your own fault and the guy got the point. But on the other hand, if I stepped in and hit someone real hard in the face and dropped them, I could be disqualified. So there are a lot of hard body contact, no pads, a lot of excitement, a lot of spirited people, and a lot of respect. Respect for the officials, respect for each other. It was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful time.
So punch on the face was allowed?
Yes, but you had to control it.
Okay.
You could control it. If you smack in the face was okay. But if you cut them, that could be problems.
No restriction for kicks, though.
No. Well, the kick, most of the time we went full power to the body but control to the head. And that was pretty much the Japanese way. They had a huge influence in the martial arts. The Koreans were starting to gain power in the United States, but the Japanese and Okinawans were what most people knew about. Robert Tree has put together the United States Karate Association, had a great group through the Midwest, Japanese-oriented, Okinawan-oriented, and then Ed Parker did the Chinese thing on the East Coast.
Ed Parker, wasn't he the one that Elvis Presley
Yes.
became a student of?
Well, so did Steve McQueen, and so did Bruce Lee trained with him also. A lot of people.
He was Texas or California based?
He was from California, actually Hawaiian, of course.
No, I know Hawaii is that.
Yeah.
That's what people say.
But Los Angeles, he had that international karate championship, which was the big one of all the tournaments. And I think the last year I fought there was 74, and there were 6,400 competitors.
In 1974.
Oh yeah, and
In
all
LA?
the yes, Los Angeles, Long Beach Arena,
Yeah.
amazing stuff. But what had happened over the years? The East Coast developed. The Japanese did their thing. The Chinese did their thing. Korean did their thing, and then all the Americans got together and they took the best of all of it. In other words, the Koreans were better kickers, the Japanese were better punchers, the Chinese had this real deceptive movement. It all came together into what we call an eclectic or an American style, and this was happening in the mid to late 60s. It really took off in the 70s. And one of the things that made it happen were the martial arts magazines. And they said, well, you guys, it's like having different rules for baseball in Los Angeles. The rules for baseball in Dallas are different. The rules were different around the country. And then a guy named Bernardo Barton said, we got to get together. He was with Karate Illustrated. The editor said, we've got to put all this together.
I remember Karate Illustrated for the
yes.
longest time.
Great magazine.
Yep.
So along with all the leaders, they all sat down. All the big guys sat down. And they said, okay, we're going to put it together. And they developed a set of rules. And the rules got better and more demanding as the sport grew. We used to have 2-point matches. Some places had 1-point matches, and they went to 3-point matches. And then they went to 5-point matches with a 3-point spread. You get a 3-point spread, 3-0, 4-1, the match is over. That's domination. Then it went to 7 points with a 5-point spread. Then it went to unlimited. But we had no pads, so the striking was the side of the hand, the back of the hand, the front of the hand, and the feet, the instep, the ball of the foot, all that going. And you could see the difference, but what was happening slowly but surely, the styles were coming together and sharing with each other. And then the fighting got better and better and better. And then Jun Rhee comes up with some other people with what he calls safety punch and safety kick. Changed everything. Because now we had pads on our hands and feet. It changes the way you move, the way you punch and kick. And then the rules changed. And then they came up with headgear. And before you know it, people were wearing mouthpieces. That was something that was unusual. So we started padding up, and the hitting increased. And for a short time, they said, okay, we're going to have knockouts. You knock your guy out in the ring. He can't get up by a 10 count. You win. Well, that was good, but what happened? The ranks of competition thinned quite a bit because a lot of people were getting their heads knocked off. And so they said, well, maybe we should control those shots to the head. Mm-hmm. And it was not unusual to see 5 or 6 ambulances at these tournaments when it was bare-fisted and also when we first went to pads, making that transition.
Even with the pads, huh?
Oh, yeah. But it was good to see the change. And then, the different organizations got involved. The major tournaments were, you had Ed Parker in Los Angeles, Alan Steen in Dallas, Pat Burleson in Fort Worth, George Minshew in Houston. You had Henry Cho and Jun Rhee on the East Coast. In the center part of the United States, you had, of course, Robert Trias with his tournaments, which are among the biggest. So there was a lot of exchanges of ideas. Of course, the Japanese felt like their way, the Koreans liked their way, the Chinese did, and the Americans said, nah, let's put it all together and take the best everyone has to offer. And that's when everything really started to grow. And when the karate magazines got behind it and they said, okay, we're going to have a top 10 list. And then they had a top 10 list and people would vote on it. Coaches would vote on it. Fighters would vote on it. And it'd be based on what you did in competition and what the other coaches and fighters thought about you. Mm-hmm. And then they started looking at international ratings. Who's the best in Europe? Who's the best in Japan now? Who's winning here? Who's winning there? Who's the best in Canada? Who's the best? So it also, the ratings changed everything. And people started looking for that recognition. And then you started seeing people keep count of their matches, who they beat, who beat them. And then there was not money. It was all glory. You were fighting to test yourself. And that was a very exciting time. There was no money in it, but there was glory in it. Mm. And you got to identify, you'd see the people that were the best fighters and you had great respect for them, the toughest fighters, the fastest fighters, the best punchers, the best kickers. It was a very exciting time to be in the martial arts. Very exciting.
So when I read about your tenure in the martial arts, you came to a number 127. Was that 127 titles that you held?
I won I placed in 120 events and I won 78 first places.
Wow.
And Larry Castor had a great saying. My instructor had a great saying.
What tenure you had? What lapse of time?
That would be, actually, that was from 1966 until 2002. I fought in 5 decades, but just a little bit as the years went on just to see if I could still do it. But mainly, most of my fighting was in the 60s and 70s, some in the 80s and 90s and 2000s.
That's your peak right there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But, Larry Castor had a great saying, and he said, if you go out and you lose a match and you don't learn from it, you lost. If you lose a match and you learn from it, it wasn't a loss, it was a learning experience. Mm. So that's what you had to, he taught us to examine what was going on, whether you win or lose, you had to examine your match and say, what do I need to do to improve? So that was a real positive thing that I learned early on from Mr. Castor.
Yeah, my late uncle, Carlos Gracie Sr., he always says, there's no defeat when there's learning.
Yes.
Yes. I think that's the pill you have to swallow.
Yep.
But you got to be honest with yourself.
Yes.
You can't win all the time. So make it count those that you don't.
That's it.
So, but I was intrigued because you mentioned Chuck Norris quite often.
Yeah.
And we both are very fond of him.
Yes.
On the screen and off the screen. And
yes.
I always mention that you meet heroes on the screen. I think Chuck Norris's biggest hero role was his real life. Yeah. He was a hero to many, including myself.
Yes.
But as a karate fighter, as a martial artist in itself, he had skills that were second to none. I relate to you that from my jiu-jitsu perspective, I remember when he was training with me and my brothers while we had the studio in LA, and even after I came to Texas years later, if you taught him something once, he would just get it, and you didn't have to teach him again.
Yeah.
He would just integrate that quite fast. So he was a very gifted learner.
Yes.
But you said something about his fighting skills in the karate, which I didn't get to witness, and follow. But you were there. You were either watching him before you started competing, or competing and fighting against his students, and witnessing him going bouts against Bill Wallace or Joe Louis, all those other great names in that martial art. Would you mind sharing with you a bit of your feedback with him?
Well, Carlos, the first time I saw him fight, I was a 19-year-old brown belt. It was in Dallas. And he beat some really good people, but it looked completely effortless. He could kick with both legs perfectly, punch with both hands. He could sweep. He could throw people. And I mean, take good fighters and like it was prearranged. I'm going to beat you. It's prearranged. But he was a gentleman, a good sportsman. He would help people up. He never took advantage of a person when he was going to score. He'd make a good hard kick or punch. He was very fast and strong, but he was a great martial artist. He was a good sportsman. If he faced someone that couldn't stand with him, he was very careful with that person. He didn't embarrass him. And that was an amazing thing about him. When I saw him fight, in the ring next to him was Joe Louis. And Joe Louis was so strong. He had a side kick, back fist, grab and punch. Everyone knew what he did. And I'd sit and watch Joe fight. The side kick hits the guy goes to the hospital. The guy comes in, he grabs him, sweeps him, punches, the ribs are broken, he goes to the hospital. And over in the other ring, Chuck Norris is not hurting anyone, but he has this incredible power and speed and control. But I had great admiration for both people. But I thought, if I make a black belt, I want to be like Chuck Norris. That's who I would like to be like. Beautiful technique, courteous, great sportsman. He was just a wonderful human being, and he proved that the rest of his life and all the things he did for children. But I watched that, and I guess it was about 2 years after that, I made my black belt in 1968. Later that year, I got drafted and went in the Army, and my first duty station was Fitzsimmons Hospital in Denver. It was the amputee headquarters for the U.S. military. During Vietnam, a lot of badly hurt people were there. I fell in with some good martial arts practitioners up there. I trained with them. Well, they had a big tournament sponsored by High Karate Cologne in 1970 in Dallas. And so I flew down to compete in the tournament, and that's where I talked to Chuck Norris for the first time. And I had a match, and I did well in the match, and he came up to me. He was very complimentary, and I said, well, Mr. Norris, I get out of the Army in about a year. I'd love to come to Los Angeles and train with you. And this is what he said. I'll never forget. He said, well, Roy, after what I saw, if you come to Los Angeles, I'd like you to train me. And I will tell you, I would not able to carry his gi bag. I was not worthy to carry his bag. But he was such a humble person, and you could see that in the way he taught. For example, if he was teaching you a front kick and you're doing a bad kick, he'd say, well, Carlos, that's a good front kick. Would you like a great front kick? So he started from that position, whereas some instructors say, man, that's terrible. That's no good at all. Chuck Norris would say, that's good, but you have the potential to make it great. And that's the way he dealt with people. And it just was an example for me. And I hope I've tried to follow that most of my life. I felt that was a very good way to talk to people and to teach students, not to beat them down, but to build them up. And that's what he did. His whole life, he did that.
Yeah. Well, I recall also one piece of the pleasant conversation that we had while we were having a grab to eat.
Yeah.
You're talking about a tournament in which you faced incredible opposition and you're not as successful. Then you had a conversation with Chuck Norris, and he gave you some feedback in a 20-minute lapse, and that changed completely the way you performed.
Changed everything. I was winning in a good way and placing more than I was winning, but I was losing to all of Chuck's black belts. He had some great black belts, and I'd travel to California. They beat me. They beat me in Texas. But they're traveling, and we're all friends. We're doing the best we can. And I got him one time in Albuquerque. Sam Alred had a black belt only tournament, and everybody from the United States came to that. And I ended up fighting John Natividad for first place. And John beat me 3-2 or 4-3 by a point. And I dropped a couple of matches to John, and I talked to him. I said, Chuck, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I said, I know I run more than these guys do. I hit the bag more. I throw a lot of kicks. I lift weights. I take the right food. I do everything I'm supposed to do, but these guys just pick me off. And he looked at me and he says, Roy, do you really want to know what you're doing, what you need to do? And I said, oh, yeah, I do. And he said, okay. He said, there are two things that you need to work on. One is called independent motion, and that means you separate the movement of the legs and the arms from the body. In other words, you don't move the body first, you move the arm first. And then you have broken rhythm, which means you don't always have the same movement. You change the movement. Maybe you're moving a little slow, then you're quick and you're moving, or you can fake with the body and then move the punch or kick without moving the body. Independent motion, broken rhythm. Changed everything. Everything.
What did he tell you about the punch, though? That was
The idea, if you're going to throw a punch, what most people to do, they'll move the body to bridge the gap and hit with that punch. If it's a back knuckle strike or a knife hand, they'll move the whole body behind it. And what he said was, and it made all sense in the world, you don't have to move the body first, just so the body's there when you hit. So in other words, you move the hand, and just before you hit, then the body goes. If you're throwing a reverse punch, the hand goes, and the body gets there at the last second. You snap the hips and shoulders at the last second. You don't do it at the beginning of the move. And that way, it's harder for them to judge your speed. It's hard to judge your timing. But if you move the body first, which is what we're all taught to do, throw those hips and shoulders, you throw those kicks, wind those legs up, load them up. Chuck said you don't have to do that. You move smoothly, and at the last second, you put all the hip and shoulder in your kicks and punches. That was the difference. Broken rhythm, independent motion. That changed everything for me for the rest of my career.
Wow.
Changed everything. 20 minutes under the bleachers at West Mesa High School in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'll never forget that.
Incredible. This episode is sponsored by Stay Humble Coffee. Coffee is so good, it doesn't need to brag. Find it at stayhumblecoffee.com. For me, what strikes me is he was giving instruction based upon what happened between you and his students.
Yes.
So he was actually helping you.
Yes.
Not even thinking about, oh, this guy might compete against my guys again in the future. He was such a good willing person that he wanted to see you better regardless.
And it wasn't so long ago, Carlos, I asked him the question, Chuck, when you gave me that lesson, when you showed me about the timing and distance, and I beat all your students, I said, why did you do that? He said two things. He said, one, because I thought you deserved it and you needed it, and two, because I thought it'd make them better black belts.
Wow.
So he gave twice. He gave to me and he gave to his own black belts.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's a very deep approach to perspective.
Yeah.
All right. So now you run a school for quite a while, right? You said at one point in time, you mentioned to me, you had like hundreds of students and you're teaching like 6 sessions a day.
Yep.
And then you turned 41 back then. And you realized, man, I don't know how long my body can keep up with this.
Well,
so
yes.
was that like, how did that come about? Because a lot of instructors, it doesn't matter what style. Sometimes they get caught up in that situation. They have to make ends meet. They have hopefully an increasing number of students, and they don't have a scale. Let's say more assistants or building up a leadership group of students to share the load with. And so you handled it all at that time, and that's the only way you knew.
Well, Carlos, I can tell you I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I had a wonderful wife who loved martial arts. She was a black belt, Jeanette. And at one point, she wanted her own school, so we opened a school for her. We had a school for me. One night a week, I'd go to her school. One night a week, she'd come to my school. And then we thought, if we got together and had one big school, we could do better. And we did. We bought land, built the school with everything we wanted in it. And then we had classes going at UTA. I was teaching an accredited class in the physical education department. My wife was teaching at daycare centers. She was teaching at private schools. We were teaching all over the place, and our school was full to overflowing. We had the schools, people coming to test with us, our instructors teaching in different locations, coming in for training with us, and then doing belt tests. On a regular month, we belt test 150 people. Wow. And the test would last all day on a Saturday, but we talked about it. And when we had the one school, it was just night and day. We get up early in the morning. We'd start teaching. I'd squeeze a workout in. She would. We'd be teaching all day. Then we'd teach late tonight. We'd get home about 10 or 10:30, exhausted. And reached a point I was about 40, 41 years old. And I thought, this is really hard. I can't see myself doing this in 5 or 10 more years. And all the injuries caught up. All the competitive injuries started catching up. So, and I've said this to other people before, but I thought, what can I do that requires no intelligence, no education, and no experience? And I had an epiphany: politics. And I was right. So I decided to run for office. I looked for an office to run for, and I looked at this one court, Justice of the Peace. And at the time, I was a reserve officer. I was on a drug team. I was on a tactical team. I've been teaching police officers for 10 or 15 years. I taught at police academies, and I went through the academy, became a licensed peace officer in the state of Texas. I was on a drug team, a high-risk forced entry drug team. I did that for 2.5 years. That was wonderful. It was like being back in karate competition again with guns. And so I did that. And then I thought, what can I do? And I thought, Justice of the Peace. You don't have to be an attorney to do that. As a matter of fact, you don't have to be an attorney to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, wow.
There are many other levels of judiciary, high up levels, where you're not required to be an attorney. They're trying to change it as quick as they can. But anyway, so I made a run for it, and I knew I had a good student base who would help me. But I needed some more help. So what I did was, Chuck Norris had his big UFAF out in Las Vegas. I flew out there, fought in his tournament, went to a seminar, and said, Chuck, I'm thinking of running for judge in Texas. Do you think you could do a fundraiser for me? And he says, well, Roy, I'm thinking about something. Let me get back with you. What he was thinking about was Walker, Texas Ranger. And he was going to move to Texas and do that series. Well, I got a call about 2 weeks later, and Chuck says, okay, I'll do it. So we had a fundraiser, and I know you can't believe this. We sold it out. And I had all the money I needed. I ran against a guy that had been in office for 2 terms. And I ran as a Republican. He was a Republican, and I won. And it was the beginning of a change in my life. And you know what the martial arts teaches you, and I know you know better than anyone, that you believe you can do it, you can do it. So I thought, I'd been a senior in college for about 8 or 9 years. I got busy fighting and running my school and teaching. I never finished. So Bill Wayburn, currently the sheriff, calls and said, Mr. Kurban, why don't we go back and get our college degree? Because he'd done the same thing. He was a chief of police that I worked for in Dalwood Gardens. And I said, okay. So we both went back to school. We both graduated, got our bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And then so by the time I took office and was sworn in, at least I had my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. So because of my training in the martial arts, I knew I needed more education. So I went back and I went to the National Judicial Academy. I studied logic and ethics, paid my own way there before I took office. I went to that. I went to every school that the state of Texas offered for being a judge. And that's what the martial arts teach. You do everything that you possibly can, learn as much as you can. Mm-hmm. And so then I took office, and I had a very busy court. And
what kind of cases?
Well, interesting enough, we had small claims cases up to about $10,000, evictions and foreclosures, which could be pretty bloody cases, pretty savage cases, a person losing their home or their business. Yeah. And besides that, we did a lot of juvenile cases, possession of drug paraphernalia, fighting, possession of alcohol. Truancy became a huge issue. It was a huge issue. So once the Arlington School District started filing in my court, Mansfield, another town, Grand Prairie, another town, just town after town. We had like 12 towns in my precinct.
Oh, my goodness.
They all started fighting because we got good results with it. So we had truancy cases. We had cases where I did officers come in would make a request for an arrest warrant. Could be an arrest warrant for drugs, could be for murder, it could be anything, but they'd come. Sometimes they'd come to my house at 12 o'clock. They had a rush, going to run a raid, they got to serve a warrant, they need it. So I did a lot of arrest warrants, but I was familiar with those because as a police officer, I served those. So I'd come in and I'd fill out the paperwork, I'd take them, put them under oath, take their oath. But we did that kind of work. Tax suits. We had so the Justice Court handles about 85% of all litigation in the state of Texas, but it's lower level cases. But the importance of it is it involves so many people, and it helps so many people. So it got bigger and bigger and bigger till I was having around 1,000 filings a month.
Wow.
And it was very demanding. So, and then I went around and I became a teacher.
That's not an easy shift.
No.
Like you left the martial arts from sunrise to sundown, and then now you're in court at same pace. Huh?
And I did something, I made a terrible mistake. I got so involved in it. I was teaching judges also. And if a judge was sanctioned by the Judicial Conduct Commission, I had to go in and go over the mistakes they made and take them through an educational series. And this is for a judge that made a bad mistake. And I had a judge from Dallas and one from Tarrant County, a couple of them. But I did that too. But I neglected, I kept teaching the martial arts, but I neglected training. And I went into the bench at about 200 pounds, 210. And by the end of my 16th year, I weighed 356 pounds. I had atrial fibrillation. I had diabetes. My health, I'd broken my pack with the martial arts. I focused on my mind. I went back and got my master's degree, went to the National Judicial Academy. I was involved in education. I was involved in all aspects of the job, but I was not involved in my life anymore.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I feel one of the premises of what we do, like not trying to change the subject to health in itself. Once you make decisions that are career changing the way you did, you're forced to be in a position. A lot of times, I don't judge police officers if they are out of shape, just because I see. I mean, I feel it's important that they take that in consideration. Don't get me wrong, but I feel sometimes it's easier for people to judge when they are not in their own shoes.
Yes.
And the shifts are long. They're on the go. You know, there's no telling, depending which precinct or jurisdiction you are at, the amount of work you have to deal with. You know, and then on top of that, some of them, not many. I mean, not a few. They take extra jobs to make ends meet. You know, extra hours, overtime, security jobs, and stuff. So they're nonstop. They're trying to make provision. So
you've been blessed in that you get your martial arts is all your life. There was a time when it was all mine. I've taught people that were in the FBI, the Secret Service. I taught police officers from local cities. I taught Texas Rangers. And I just developed a great love and respect for them. Hence, I went into being a peace officer myself back in '88. I loved it. And at one time, I looked at Sheriff Wayburn. He was the chief then. I said, if I don't win this election for judge, I think I'd like to do what you're doing. I think I'd like to be a chief in a small town in Colorado or New Mexico. And he said, well, Mr. Kurban, if you're not elected, you and I will go to the FBI Academy together. Well, I was elected. He went to the FBI Academy. He was gone for 3 months of that, and his son followed in his footsteps and did the same thing. Oh, wow. But Bill Wayburn was a huge influence in my life. He started training at my school when he was 16, made his black belt with us, was a really excellent black belt, competed. And then as his career got bigger and bigger and bigger, he still works out, but he had to put it to the side to focus on the other thing. And now, Bill is a sheriff in one of the largest departments in the United States, and he's now the vice president of the major sheriff's office for the whole country. And next year he'll probably be the president. We talk about an amazing guy. A guy grew up on a ranch, cowboy, amazing guy, and a great black belt. So we both were running through different things at the same time. We were both doing that. Yeah.
Well, I do feel though, health in the martial arts.
Yes.
Is a lifestyle. It's part of the lifestyle. Like you said earlier, you watched what you ate, especially when you're competing. I still do it even now. I try to, because I feel with me longevity has its perks. Besides the fact that once you advance in age, you don't have to deal or mitigate at least the issues of age. To be healthy in old age, but at the same time to preserve your ability to function. Because I feel you get wiser and more knowledgeable, and then if your body's not there, if your mind starts to decline, whatever contribution you could give at the time you have the most wisdom gets sabotaged.
You're exactly right.
So I hate that to be the case.
You're exactly right.
But I guess you had your epiphany, because you realized. And from that perspective, what did you do to change that? Because you look in much better shape than what you're describing back then.
I dropped 136 pounds, and I weigh what I did when I first went in the police academy. I weighed about 212 to 220, which is a good weight for me. I'd like to do better, but I just don't eat dinner. And for breakfast, I'll have fruit, and I have whatever I want for lunch, and that's it. I'm done.
So this is your formula now?
That's it.
Okay.
That works.
So skip dinner, light breakfast, and then have
Whatever I want at lunch, yeah. And it's worked real well for me. But when I met you today and I looked at you, I thought, he's still in shape. You still have it. I looked at you, I patted your shoulder, and I did that for a reason. I can tell you're in shape. But we all do that, don't we? As martial artists, we look at people and say, well, that guy's in shape or he's not in shape. Mm-hmm. We all do that. And I said, yeah, this is the guy. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you what. So give me now the perspective. What challenged you the most when you were in the martial arts? And I can tell you a couple of things, because you're a great competitor for quite a while, but you were a very diligent instructor, taking care of a lot of students. And I understand that those parallels, they go to a point, but then you have to a situation where if I'm going to compete a lot more, I'm going to have to leave aside the instruction. Yep. If I'm going to teach a lot more, it may hurt my competition because it may affect the amount of training. So how did that work out for you?
Well, the thing is, you think about your training, and I would think, okay, 5 days a week, I must throw 1,000 kicks total. And of those 1,000 kicks, 250 will be with ankle weights on. I must run 5 days a week. One day I'll run 3 miles. The next day I'll run 1 mile, but I'll do bleachers that day or run 50-yard and 100-yard wind sprints. I must do weights. I'll do weights 3 days a week. 1 day a week I do nothing, but usually 6 days a week I've got something going on. When I'm competing and training and fighting, I'll fight 3 or 4 days a week. I'll spar for 30 minutes to an hour. So we're looking at 4 to 5 hours a day, split up. Some in the morning, afternoon, some in the evening. You have to split it up. And I did that. And I did that and loved it. Was sore all the time. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Loved it. That's where I needed to be. But when I really got into the teaching and I thought, okay, I'm going to have to hold off on some of that. I did a lot of racquetball, did a lot of Nautilus training. I kept the running up, but my time was slipping away from me, especially when I got elected. And it's just like when you approach your martial arts, you do it with your whole heart and soul. You're completely involved. You get up thinking about it in the morning. Before you go to sleep, you're thinking about it. And that's the difference in a person that's a hobbyist and a person that loves it and follows it completely. Mm. And all I can say was I was surrounded, at the time, going back to competition, the competitive group at that time was phenomenal. The teachers at that time were phenomenal. The promoters doing tournaments. It was a target-rich environment. We were all friends. We beat each other to a pulp, but it was so exciting because there was so much out there, and we all contributed to it, whether we were helping with the rules or refereeing or fighting or developing our own fighters and team matches. All of that was just wonderful. So when you do that, that becomes part of your life, and it goes over. I took all those lessons to be a judge. I'm taking all those lessons now to be a chief at the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. Martial arts has so much to teach you as a human being about yourself, about what really counts, about what really matters, and how to achieve your goals. You work hard, but you have to work smart too. Mm-hmm. But it teaches you how important it is to have goals and to believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. You believe in your students, but if you don't believe in yourself, nothing works.
Yeah. Well, but the point I made is you had a situation in which you had to maybe choose, I'm going to have to do more of this and less of that, because you couldn't do both at an optimal level. That's the kind of like the point I wanted to kind of.
That was an excellent point, and I dodged it as best I could. But what happened is I lived a complete physical life, and I went to a mental life, and I had to put the physical side down, and it was a terrible mistake. Mm. It was a terrible mistake. I should have worked to achieve the balance, but I'm buried in the law books. I'm buried in the rules of civil procedure, the rules of criminal procedure, the tax code. I'm looking at all that, the juvenile code. I don't want to make mistakes with people's lives. In the same way as you teach, you don't want to make mistakes with your students' life.
Yep.
And if I look back on it now, the hindsight being 20/20, I would have done that, but I would have done things differently. I would never have given up the running and the weights and the kicking and punching. I just would have done a lot less. But I would never, But one day I kept teaching. I thought, well, I'm a football coach. I'm like a football coach now. I don't run plays with my men. I tell them how to do it. And I work that corner. I referee, but I don't do it with them anymore. Whereas before I'd kick and punch in class, and you work in your class. And that was a terrible loss. And it was a very powerful lesson for me because I almost lost all my health. I reached a point, and the reason I retired when I did, I had no opposition to run for a fifth term. I had no opposition, but I knew if I ran again, I'd die in office.
Is that why you retired from being a judge?
I made two.
Really?
I made 2 trips to the hospital in the back of an ambulance, and I had to make a choice.
Mm.
I had to make a choice. I had to completely change my life, and that's what I did. And when I retired, actually, my wife and I had a place in a couple of counties over. We had a cabin out by a lake, and so we moved out there. And what I did was, there were 8 cabins on 10 acres and a nice road around there. I'd block all the way around the cabins on that 10 acres, not hard blocks, or I'd throw front kicks and then throw round kicks and then back kicks and side kicks and punches and blocks. And I just do them slow because I'm trying to regain my health. I'm in terrible condition. And sometimes I'd have to stop. I couldn't keep going. But what I would do is just slowly got it back. And, you have always that sense of urgency has never left me. I have a sense of urgency today. Like Larry Castor said, Roy, live with a life of sense of urgency, fight with a sense of urgency, teach with a sense of urgency, because you don't know how much time you've got.
Right.
And I will tell you at 77, I don't know how much time I've got left.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is done with this. I've never given up on that. Perhaps I should, but I never have.
Mm.
That sense that you have only so much opportunity to do certain things, and you don't want to leave anything left unfinished. You don't want to leave anything left unfinished.
Now, from a judge's career, what were the main challenges? Because you talked about foreclosure, for instance. And were you a judge in 2008 when they had
I was. I believe I retired in 2000. I retired in 2006.
Okay.
I stepped
Because
down.
on 08, that's when they had the debacle with the economy, and there were a lot of real estate falling apart. So I was just curious how much you had to deal with grievances and people that couldn't make payments, and you had to make the decision.
Well,
from a human perspective, how does that affect you?
Well, there was a saying. It's a Latin expression called capias pro fine, and basically, what it means is you pay your fine or you go to jail and sit it out. And back then it was $50 a day. Well, if you put a guy in jail because he hadn't paid his fine or couldn't pay his fine, now he can't work. Now he can't pay his rent. Now he can't feed his family. So I look for alternative methods, and that would be to have him do community service 1 day a week. You go down to the First Baptist Church and work there. You go over to Dalwyn Gardens and work in the park. You work around, mow the grass at the park for 1 day, and you get, instead of going to jail, you give 1 day a week to working out your fine at $50 a day. And we did that with kids. We had parents that just couldn't pay their fines, and you'd give them an opportunity. And that made all the sense in the world. Mm. So you get an understanding about people and their problems. And I think one of the big challenges, too, was you have a sense, as all of us do, of righteous indignation. You come into court and you hear some really bad things. And you're sitting there, and you can't be angry. You've got to sit there and be focused, like being a martial artist. Lose your temper, lose your life. You've got to stay focused. No matter how bad the situation, you've got to focus in on what you're going to do. You can't let your anger control you. And early on, that was tough. I'll tell you, I had a case once. It was an eviction suit. It was on a commercial property. And I hadn't been in office long, and there was an elderly gentleman as the plaintiff presenting the case. And apparently the guy had threatened him because the elderly gentleman was just shaking when he was presenting his case. He was reading it off. Well, the other gentleman, the defendant in the case, kept interrupting him. And I looked at him and said, "Sir, what happens in court is the plaintiff presents their case, and when he's done, he explains why you owe him money, why he's entitled to the property. You explain why you don't owe money, and you offer your evidence, and you explain why you should keep the property. But it's his turn now. Your turn is next." Well, the guy interrupted him again and kept it up. And I'm a brand new judge, so I stood up, and I started to walk around the bench. I was going to just punch him in the face. The disrespect and the fear he'd put in that old man. I thought, I can't do that. I'm a judge. I can't do that. So there was a police officer sitting in the back of the room, and I said, "Officer." He said, "Yes, sir." He's from another city, Arlington Police Department. And I was a county judge. I said, "If he opens his mouth again, I want you to put him in cuffs and take him out." He said, "Yes, sir." And he broke the big guy. Ended up being a sergeant at the sheriff's department many years later. But when he stood up, the guy got quiet. So, it was very, very interesting. And I think I can't do that. This is not a place, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with what's right and what's wrong. It has to do with solving a problem. It's not me. I can't be part of the problem.
Right.
I've got to be the solution. So that was, and you think about your martial arts. When you teach a person skills and someone's trying to hurt them, that's the solution. You don't have to be hurt. You can protect yourself. That's the whole thing. And as a teacher, you give those people those abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you success stories that you have teaching people. I know you've got hundreds of them where someone's coming and say, Sensei, I did this and this. It worked so well. The guy didn't hurt me. I did just enough. And you think, yeah, that there was a meaning in that. So the same thing is true of being a police officer, helping a person resolve a problem without violence if possible, or being a judge, helping two people come together, or making a decision that favors one over the other because one party's right and the other's wrong, but to be detached about doing it. Not being angry when you throw that hard side kick or front kick or you put them in that choke, doing it because it's what you need to do. It's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the martial arts teaches us that.
Yeah. So how instrumental was the martial arts in terms of your network? Because you said that, like you mentioned earlier, Mr. Wayborn, and then other individuals that you knew beforehand through the martial arts, and somehow there was a leverage there of knowing who knows who, and then can you play out that and how that was a factor in your career?
One word: trust. You train with somebody and you get to know them, you trust them, you demonstrate by the way you act and the way you talk and the way you think that you're worthy of their trust. And then you have people that work together and do very, very good work together, not because one party owes another party anything, but because they trust you.
Mm-hmm.
They know your judgment. They know you'll do a good job and you'll be faithful to your oath, that you won't break your oath. So that's a lot of it. And I know that there are people that you work with, you have complete trust with. You know that you can get out there and have a great, great match. And there are other people you think, okay, I'm going to watch this guy a little bit closer. Maybe because you don't trust him a little bit, or maybe because he doesn't have real good control or skill. So you watch him differently than the guy that you trust completely. Mm. Trust is everything.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, not funny, interesting. I think also there's a degree of camaraderie that comes along.
Yes.
And I remember a passage in which I had a student who owned a business, online marketing. He was very thriving at that time. And it was at the time when a lot of people were losing jobs, students of mine in my academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the people in the room. I knew what each of them did, whether employees or employers. And then I heard that this gentleman lost his job. And then I spoke to this other gentleman who owned a business. I said, hey, would you mind helping this gentleman out and see if there's anything you can offer him? And I always joke about it. It is in my best interest that my students maintain their job or find a job because I want them to continue to pay me, But the bottom line is that same gentleman that owned the online business was able to hire 7 students out of the class that also eventually fell into the same situation in which they lost their job. And had I not interfered with just that question and hooking them up, because the owner of the business didn't know that there was a person that lost a job within the group that shared the match during the class. So this guy was saying, hey, coach, I might have to stop because I lost my job. I said, what do you do? Oh, okay, I work this. Okay, cool. Let me see what I can do about it. Then I would kind of try to poke into my other students who I knew owned some business and connected the two, and lo and behold. And you know what's ironic with all that? The level of trust that they had.
Yes.
Independent of any resume or competence that they may or may not have for the job, because they knew each other on the mat, there was like a hidden code of honor that was at play, that the employee actually did great when he started working for the business of his teammate.
Yes. And
for years after, as a matter of fact, I met one of them last week. I remember this guy who actually lost his job and became an employee to the student who owned a business, right?
Yeah.
The student who owned the business sold the business. The employee kept working still for the same business. He's now is a higher up in the very company that the original employer is no longer involved, right?
Right.
So he's thriving. He's doing well. He's paying. He's sending his kids to college. He's having a good life. And I'm not saying that wouldn't be the case, but it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
And you continue to teach. You're teaching them with what you did.
Yeah.
You're teaching.
So-
They're living a jiu-jitsu life. And they
So this became for me standard, and I don't understand how you can neglect not knowing who's in your room and what they do. And like you said, the trust factor with the martial arts, putting the two together, man, there's a lot that can happen there for the good, right?
Well, that is absolutely true. You know, getting back to the trust thing, when you're running a drug raid, there's no fear involved. It's like competing. There's excitement, but you absolutely depend on the people that you're going with. And what's interesting is when I went to work at the sheriff's office, the sheriff had 6 black belts working for him, chiefs and administrative assistants from our club, because he trusted them, because they'd proved themselves to him on the Dojo floor. He'd known them for years, and they worked as a team and they supported each other.
Yeah. So in the military, they have a similar thing. Your comrade, you know that
Yes.
even if you have grievances with somebody, but if you know when you're on duty, when you're on the field, if you had to do the job, you know that you're going to be watching each other's back because
Yes.
you got to. There's no other option. But the same kind of applies with law enforcement. You talk about drug raids. As a matter of fact, since you're mentioning this, I'm just curious from my perspective, how busy were you in your law enforcement? Because you said you were part of a narcotics team or
Well, basically at that time I was running my school and it was doing real well. So 2 days a month I'd work midnights on a Friday night or Saturday night. That'd be from 11 to 7. And the night time's the right time. That's when all the activity is going on. And then on at least, I sat down, I think 10 or 11 times we ran drug raids where we'd hit apartments and I was the doorman. I got to knock the door down. And we had a way that we went in, but we had absolute confidence in each other. And it was like being in a tournament. It was very exciting. I was never afraid. We've all got guns. Some guys are carrying shotguns. Some have machine guns. Some are carrying pistols. So there's a chance there's going to be an accident there, but it never happened. And we all believed in each other. There was never lost anyone. We never shot anybody, never hurt anybody in all that time, and made some pretty good arrests. But we were a team, and we believed in each other. And I think that was very, very important. Very important.
Yeah. Wow.
You're exactly right.
How, if you can, based upon your experience back then and now, how much of a problem has it become, the drug issue in your county? Because we talk about fentanyl, like Mr. Wayborn was talking about some of the advent of the new drugs.
I'd like to answer differently, but it's worse than it was back in the 80s and 90s. It's much worse.
Mm.
And I don't know. There seems to be a terrible flaw in our society that allows people to do that or they feel encouraged to do it or try it.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be greater than it was when we were younger.
Do you think justice is soft on criminals?
Well, there's
is that politically correct to mention that?
It depends upon the judge.
Mm. It's like, because I know when you talk about, let's say, more liberal counties or states compared to Texas we still consider a bastion of conservatism.
Yes.
Despite the fact you had your pockets here and there.
Yes.
How do you explain that, though, if somebody is complicit or guilty of a crime and they just get a slap on the wrist?
You watch the news all the time, and you watch and see how our previous administration allowed 10 to 15 million people in the country with no checks on them. And these people are hurting us. They're hurting each other. They're hurting us. They're killing innocent people. There was a terrible mistake made there. Or a judge sets a low bond and lets a person out. It's got to be done on a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. And if a person is not committed a terrible crime, but a smaller crime, and you can give them a chance at re-education, give them an opportunity to improve their position, then maybe that's a solution. But if they've done something terrible, then that's a different story.
Right.
You can't allow them to be a threat to your children or your family or my family.
Yeah.
When somebody breaks faith, breaks trust, and hurts another human being or kills another human being, they've given up their right. If it's all proven in court, it's all the evidence is laid out, then they need to pay the price. That's not to say that when they're in jail or prison, they can't take counseling. They can't take education courses. They can't meet people that are trying to change their life. That's one of the things I do in my job is I'm in charge of reentry, helping people get back into society.
Mm.
And that's if they want to go back, we make education possible. We have chaplains that go to, we have 30 prayer sessions a month. We have church 30 days a month for people that want to go. If a person can believe there is a God that's bigger and more important than him, a forgiving and loving God, that's all the difference in the world.
Mm.
Faith is so important. And a lot of people, apparently in this day, they just don't believe in it. They just say, no. They disagree and they go their own way. But that's a very important thing. We talk, you have faith in your martial arts instructor. You have faith in your parents, faith in your wife and your children. You have faith in your ability to handle a problem because you've been taught how to handle it. But the faith, there's got to be someone bigger than us. There is a God above us. Mm-hmm. There's someone that we have to believe in that keeps us on the straight and narrow, that gives us hope. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine living a life and believing that when you die, you just stop? There's nothing after that. Yeah. There's no reason. You don't have to be good. It makes no difference. You're going to be dead anyway. Mm-hmm. What a terrible way to live your life.
Right. So politics, you know, and they say politics is not for the faint of heart.
No.
And what we see, you know, it's easier for us with the headlines and all the media coverage, which sometimes mainstream media does such a poor job of telling the truth or relaying the facts as they should be. So thank God there's an internet. And even then, there's always some, you know, weird channels out there that may misinform more than inform. But you being an insider, because, you know, you said, I decided to get into politics. Yeah. You are an elected official.
Yes.
Right? So it's kind of like a game that you learn how to navigate. I'm not even saying playing, because sometimes it's not that pleasant to play. Yeah. Nobody wants to play games, but you got to navigate on occasion. What kind of challenge that offers you? Because
you want to make sure that when you do a job, that people are going to always criticize. They're going to look at what you're doing. And it's their right. It's a free country. They can criticize. You want to make sure that you do your job so well that it's going to be difficult to criticize, that you're fair to everyone you deal with, that you're making a difference in society, that you're helping people. You've got to do that and believe that. But even so, you still watch during the day, or you watch the news, and people are criticized when they shouldn't be. I see it happen on a local level. I see it obviously on a national level. You watch TV. But the sad thing is, it seems like there's a flaw in our education that keeps people from thinking logically and analyzing by what they're seeing and hearing. They hear a newscaster say something, and that's true. They say, this guy is bad. It's true. They don't have the ability to logically analyze what they've seen or heard or weigh the evidence. Mm-hmm. And that's a flaw in our education system. And we see that now. It's a terrible thing. You read about what percentage of the kids can read at a certain level or do math, and it's frightening, 30%, 15, 20%, depending on their school. And it was never like that when you and I were in school. Mm-hmm. It was never like that. We were excited. We respected our teachers. We accepted challenges every day in school. We welcomed the opportunity to learn. I know there's still young people that still believe that and do that. Mm-hmm. But it seems like there's a greater number of people that just are disinterested in that and just seeking pleasure and not seeking.
Yeah, the indoctrination, definitely, and the dumbing down.
Yes.
Those two things are present in many campuses, unfortunately. And then you have the bias of media and on many occasions that perpetuate or keep a narrative according to whatever interests they are representing, which often is not the same as the citizens or the American people.
Exactly.
But from a personal level, it doesn't matter how good you do. When you face bias, you're never going to be good. or good enough in their eyes, because they don't care about how well you do.
Yes.
They care about demonizing you to whatever lobby or interest feeds them. And how easy it is for you or not to anticipate the criticism. Because I know Mr. Wayborn, in occasions I spoke to him, he spends quite some time doing PR. Like he has to kind of go and show, like, besides all the great work that he does, he has to deal with all the crap that sometimes is uncalled for, because people are misrepresenting whatever the facts are.
That's exactly.
And he said something like, he prays a lot.
Yeah.
He continues to do his workout. What happens to you in that fashion, and how do you cope with it?
Well, I have to say that as a chief of the sheriff's office, I'm not the political figure Sheriff Wayburn is, and he is truly one of the best people I know, one of the strongest men I know, and just one of the best guys. And he is unfairly attacked, but almost every elected official in any kind of a position is going to be attacked by the other side. Yeah. Instead of being attacked with, you failed in this area, this was a mistake, you did this wrong, they're attacking them in areas where there's no reason to attack. And Bill has a strong heart because Bill Wayburn, our sheriff, is a black belt. He is a man of deep faith, and he's always got that. And sometimes I look at him and I say, well, Sheriff, how's it going? I said, I don't know how you're taking all this. He said, oh, it's all right. It's all right. He goes to church on Sunday, takes his family to church, or he's giving a sermon at church. He's an ordained minister. A lot of people don't know that. Wow. But he's a very special person, and he's come under attack from the press. And to give you an example, there was one member of the press that was on him just continuously. Sheriff Wayburn completed his master's degree at Oxford University in England.
Wow. His
last part of the program, the last month of his program, he was in Oxford. This is before he became sheriff. And so he's listing his education, and a member of the local press attacked him on that and claimed he was lying and all that. Well, there's a rebuttal printed in the local newspaper by Prince Charles of England, who wrote a big article and said, Bill Wayburn is a graduate of our master's program. He completed everything. He said, now, we don't think so much of Harvard or Yale because you've only been here 200 or 300 years. Our school's been there 1,100 years or 800 years. He just totally attacked this writer, and the newspaper printed it. Should have been printed on the front page. It was Prince Charles before he became King Charles. But I remember that, and the sheriff was so happy because he'd worked hard to get that master's degree, and he'd earned that master's degree. And his son followed in his footsteps, got his master's degree. The sheriff graduated from the FBI Academy. His son is now a deputy chief, and he graduated from the FBI Academy. So they're a family that values freedom, they value education, they value hard work. Mm-hmm. Is that not what the martial arts is all about? Mm-hmm. Isn't it really about that? Yeah. So I hope and I believe, and I think he tells me that he does, that it's really helped him. His black belt training really helped him. And he was with us for many years before he took the test and competed and did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think about that.
Well, some of the latest is that you had an election not long ago.
I did.
And you've kept a pretty good record up to then.
Right.
And I don't know to what extent you'd like to comment how it is to do a race and have a turnout, I guess, different than what it has been the case up to now. Mm-hmm. And what did you stand for, if you want to say, and what's the overall perspective, how you see the future?
Well, my wife, 5 years ago, my wife and I moved to this real nice little town. And then we went and watched the city council work a little bit, and it seemed very funny to me. There was a lady that ran for mayor, and she won like 65% of the vote, beat a guy that had been there for 2-3 terms. And the reason she won was that the city was worried. There's something wrong. You can see, something's wrong, you feel something's wrong. Maybe you can't prove it, but you know it's there. And that's what was going on. So we went to watch her debate, and we decided to throw our hat in with her. We contributed to her campaign. She won the election. We went to see her run the city council, and what we saw was a complete and total disrespect to this mayor who was elected. Now she's a grandmother. She founded her own business, runs her own investment business for retirement, helps people retire. And she was an entrepreneur, successful woman, beautiful house, great family. And they're attacking her every time there's a meeting, when there's not a meeting, even the staff attacks her. And we thought there's something wrong. Why is this going on? You know something's wrong. How do you prove that something's wrong like this? Well, to me, I'm thinking, having been involved in politics for years, somebody's making money under the table. Somebody's getting benefit, and somebody's losing benefit when she was elected. So my wife and I talk, and I say, Jeanette, why don't you run for office? Okay. And she says, no, you run. So I get talked into it. And there are two other people running. There are three of us running against three people that were appointed. The city council's been appointed, not elected. Because people get elected, they get disheartened, they resign. Then they appoint people. They were city council appointed by people who were also appointed. Amazing stuff. So we said, okay, we'll run it. So what I did was I contacted my students across the United States, just emailed them out, and I raised $25,000, and where most people are spending $3,000 or $4,000. I never expected all that money. Black belts around the country, New York, California, New Mexico, Colorado, everywhere where I had black belts that had moved, and from Texas, they just sent me this money. So we ran a campaign. We had a lot of money to do it, so we ran a good campaign. We walked door to door the whole time. Every day I'd get off work, and I'd walk until it got dark. Jeanette would drive me, and I'd get out and talk to people. The other candidates were doing it. The people that we were running against didn't do it. Mm. They didn't work like we did. They didn't put signs up and everywhere. They didn't go door to door and tell people what we were running for. And the main thing we were running for, a couple of things, was to make sure that the town was developed correctly. They had done a study on the roads, and all of a sudden the city council voted unanimously to finish this road for $10 million. At the end of the road is a beautiful piece of property waiting to be developed. But they'd also paid $30,000 previously for an engineering study and found 10 to 12 roads that were in much worse repair than the road they were giving $10 million to. So the mayor comes up and said, why don't we put this to a vote? Let the taxpayers vote on this. No, we're going to pass it. We put together a committee to go out and get a petition. We had to get over 300 names for people to say, yeah, we want to look at this and see why they think this is more important than what the engineer said. So we got that done. They fought that. And then we put together what's called home rule. There's a group of citizens that all got together. We had a former elected state official, a state representative. We had school teachers. We had attorneys. We had engineers. We had moms, grandmothers, college students. 12 people worked on it for 6 months, looked at the whole issue of home rule. What home rule does, it gives the city more power to run itself. You have a general law city, which very small cities have because they have low budget, but our town was ready for that. We put the package together, beautiful package, looked at about 30 other cities, squeezed it down to 10, then down to 3, debated everything, put it together, beautiful package. So we brought it to the city council, and basically they have no choice. They've got to put it on the next election. They fought it. And now they're saying, we want to do a home rule package. Why? When a group of very intelligent people had already put the package together. So they come up and say, we want our own home rule package. We want to do it. What they're saying to me is we're going to appoint people there to do what we want them to do. And that's not what we had. We had nobody there to make more money in our group. A lot of them were older people, very experienced people. Mm-hmm. So when we see a couple of things, and then they said, then I was accused in a local newspaper of being a liar. And I broke the law because certain information has to be in front of all signs that you post for election. It was there. The guy that runs a newspaper took someone else's word for it and didn't look at the sign. It was all there. So he either printed a retraction or we were going to sue him. He printed the retraction. But the lies were planted and the lies continued. And when we lost, all three of us running together, we lost by the same percentage all of us did. And what are the chances of that? So in one sense, I want to believe it was completely above board. I want to believe that it was a fair election. But I'll be honest, going into the election, all my instinct and all my past experience said, we got this one won. We outworked them. We did more for the city. We had more meetings. We had public meetings. We had question and answer periods. They'd never done that. They'd ruled in silence is what they had done. And they won. It's my first election loss. I had to wait till I was 77 to lose an election. But it wasn't for not trying. It wasn't, and I had so many people helping, students helping and friends helping. And when we went into that election night, I knew we were going to win because we had done the work, we'd been out. But apparently they had convinced enough people that we were criminals and that we'd lied and that we were doing bad things, and none of that was true. And on our group of candidates, we're all older people. Mm. Yeah. So it was very interesting. So was that a lesson for me? Yeah. It means everything isn't the way it should be. And we knew that. You know that. We all know that. But it was very disappointing to work that hard and have that many people participate and help. And then at the last second, see the election go exactly. And when I saw the first results that night, I thought, no, they made a mistake. They flipped these. We should be leading by about 20 points. That's the way it came out. So what to do? We can stay active and still keep talking about the things that should happen for the city, but I think the city is in for big trouble. Mm-hmm. I think they're talking about all these big data centers. They're trying to get in. They're doing other things too. There are a huge number of apartments, and this was a small town, rural town, a lot of ranches and farms out there. Nice, quiet place, rolling hills. It's about to change. And we've got Fort Worth coming west to us, all this building going on. We understand change is coming, but it can be slowed down and handled correctly. But I'm sad to say I don't think that's going to happen. Mm. But it's just it's happening in our city, but it's happening in cities across America right now. This is not news. Yeah. This is not new. And we were talking about politics in your country, and I'm sure you went through you've seen the same thing and experienced the same things. People do the same thing as below, so above, they do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the higher parts of government and the lowest parts.
I think it's a reflection, it's a microcosm of a universe, right? If you see at a city level, the same kind of issues kind of popping in here and there.
Yes.
And when you amplify to the higher levels, you see, but I think here, though, for people who are listening, the importance of having the local citizenry involved and engaged mm-hmm. in what's going on. Like if you have a city council situation, if you have a gathering of some sort, some event or session in which people attend and they can voice their opinions, I think there's still possibilities that things can be handled, if anything. I'm not saying it's going to change the results, but as long as people know what matters and they are engaged to whatever degree, because, the higher ups out there, they're busy with other issues. They're, are relevant on a larger scale, but on the local level. So I guess they say, think globally, but act locally. Mm-hmm. I like that motto. I can change the world, the whole globe, if I improve my neighborhood.
Right.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think so. And that's why I got involved. It was I went from a county government to a small city government. Yeah. I had 10 or 12 cities, some of them with 500,000 people in my precinct. But this was a small city of around 8,000 or 9,000 people. And I thought, well, I can make a difference here. And Jeanette was real excited about it. She says, we can make a difference. We can slow this up. We can make this a good town. We can make sure that this, and we're involved. We're going to go to a meeting on those. They got one of those big data centers coming in. We're going to a county-wide meeting. The county's really turning out for it. They don't want it, and we need the data centers. We absolutely need them, but there's a place for them. And when you put it in close area to population, you can hurt people. You can definitely hurt the water supply. You can hurt people. You can destroy environment with them. So it's got to be done in a correct way.
Yeah.
So and we really think we're both prepared to. We have property in another county. We're both prepared to move if it does come in. We figure it'll take them 2 or 3 years, one way or the other, to get it. If it doesn't, then we'll move. Move. Be old people in the country is what we'll be, I guess.
Wow. This episode is brought to you by Machado Method Nutrition, premium fuel for disciplined athletes who train with intent and recover with purpose. Live the method. Fuel the life. Start now at machadomethodnutrition.com. You know what? I always believe when you do good things, that things don't get easier. Actually, the challenges become greater. But that's a sign that you're on the right track.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
I
Because
do.
don't they say that God never gives you a burden heavier than your shoulders can carry?
Yes.
You know, I think that's for me the illustration of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And I trust that your incredible story in which you have been overcoming opponents in all arenas, from the great karate tournaments to, serving as a public servant, to elections, and taking care of your community, taking care of your health, you know, and we need more people like you, sir.
Well,
We need
thank
more
you.
people like you. I'd like to conclude with, what message do you give as an outstanding martial artist, instructor, judge, justice of the peace, and chief, you know, of the great Mr. Bill Wayborn?
Yes.
What you want to leave out there for the world?
I think I could say this for you too. I'm going to quote a guy named Winston Churchill, who at the end of World War II came to the United States and was speaking before an audience of about 10,000 people. And I believe it was Columbia, Missouri. All these people had come to hear this great man talk. The guy that had fought the Nazis, had never given up, had won the war with America. And he got up there and a silence fell over the crowd. And he said, "Never, ever, ever give up." And he sat down. And everybody was stunned. They couldn't believe that was then all of a sudden, everybody knew. And he got a phenomenal ovation because that was the great truth. And I think that's what we have to do here. We don't ever give up. There's a time to let go, and it's when we're leaving this world and hopefully going to heaven, where we give the things in this world up. We give it up. But until that time, we always try and do the best we can at whatever we're doing. We never give up.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
Sir, it was an honor and a pleasure.
It was my honor, and thank you so much for having me. I was so forward-looking, just couldn't believe I was getting to meet you. I've heard about you for years, and what an honor it's been for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Kamsahamnida.